Ars Libri is an everyman's journey, book by book, through Western literature. We read, retell, and reclaim our rich heritage. Be sure to subscribe to the show at arslibri.substack.com. We're going to talk about a book that was written during the 1800s. It has been called The Italian War and Peace. The Italian War and Peace.
A bit of a saga.
That's how big it is. That's how epic it is. It's also historical. It walks you through Italy from 1812 to 1918.
Wow.
Several generations of the Churning family.
Wasn't it a trilogy?
It is a trilogy. There's 3 books total. It's called The Mill on the Po, or Il Mulino del Po, by Riccardo Bacchelli. It was written in the early 1900s. It follows the Scaccioni family, which is a working class family, and that in itself is a political statement. The little man, the common man, not the lives of the great men, the common man. I'll go through really quickly what the books are about, and then we'll dive into some themes, because that's the best way to tackle this massive epic. I feel like I've been challenged by this book. I don't feel like I've mastered it at all. I feel like I would need to read this several times. It's like having read War and Peace by Tolstoy one time, and now I'm going to talk about it. And I'm not Russian. Okay, I lived in Italy, though, and this book was centered on the Po Valley, which is between the southern Alps and the northern Apennines. Between those two mountains, there is a big, huge valley called the Po Valley. And through it runs the river, the Po River, from the Alps all the way to the Adriatic, all across Italy, completely across it, kind of going southeast in its direction. It's a beautiful valley, and the story is focused in that region, specifically on the Po River. It follows Scaccioni from his single manhood all the way through him finding a family, establishing this mill. Actually, he establishes the mill first and then gets a family. And then through the lives of his posterity. Giuseppe is his son. He eventually has a son. All the way from the Napoleonic Wars through the unification of Italy into the Great War, World War I, all the way through. And there are big themes that span that time. So I said it focuses on the Po River. The Po River in the books is actually a character itself. The river is fickle. The river is stable. The river is dangerous. The river is safe. The river is a source of life. He builds the mill, and it produces life, money, and grain and things like this for everybody else. But it's also a source of death as it floods and it's a torrent. So the Po River is a source. Also, the Po River is a geographical, political, and cultural boundary. Just north of it, something happens, and just south of it, something else happens. And depending on which side you're on and when you are there, could change your whole course of life. So one of the themes also in this book is how the lives of common people are affected by large events and how to survive those tumultuous times, not just in your life, but in generations, how to survive that. It strikes a chord, I think, in conservatives today who want to see the family as the stability unit, the stable unit of society, when politics change so quickly and even sometimes church trends change quickly. You want to pull things in and make the family this stable. That's exactly what happens here. It's exactly what happens for the Scaccioni family. It's interesting to follow him, Scaccioni, again as a single man, a carefree man, into his adulthood, and he becomes a married man with children, and he has worries now. I'm a father now. When I read these things, I see that, the whoop and wharf, not just of time, but of a single man's life. The dignity of labor, the dignity of the working class people, It's like a kind of working class movement, I guess. Didn't just happen in the United States. It happened in Italy also, elsewhere. The sanctity of the family unit, as I mentioned.
Well, it's funny you mentioned War and Peace. The same things were happening there with the serfs and the
In
peasants.
Russia.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I point out to students all the time. Whenever you're studying history, American history, the things that were happening here weren't just happening here. They were happening all over the Western world and sometimes beyond as well. Another theme is how faith and family survive political upheavals and time. So we're going to explore some of that. Let me just say quickly what happens in the books. Basically, Czerny starts off, he's a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars. He's fighting for Napoleon because, again, he's a little man and he's subject to these greater powers that come along and take up his whole country's cause, take up his whole country in another cause. And so some of the men do it out of pride and bravado. They just want to go fight a war. Some of them do it because they need money. Others do it because they're afraid, but they go fight for Napoleon, and they're up in Russia, and it turns terrible, and they have to get back. And that's when you're introduced to Czerny, who grew up on the water with his father. And because he knows how to navigate water and build bridges and things, he gets to the head of the retreat because they have to cross rivers abruptly, really quickly. And he knows how to build bridges and pontoons and how to get across them without any of that. So he's able to make his way back. One of the interesting things, though, that happens in the beginning when he's still a soldier is that his immediate commander or immediate superior is dying. And he tries to save him. Czerny tries to save his superior. And the man was a true-blooded Republican of the Enlightenment. He believed in Napoleon's cause, which was lack of religion, atheism, secularism, and really just spitting on the church. A lot of the revolutions that happened, this is it. When you read this book, you really have to get into some of the history of what was going on. These revolutionaries came through and ransacked the churches all throughout Europe. I won't say all the atrocities that they did to the priests and nuns and to the images and everything, but they laid siege to the churches. They didn't just run in real quick. I mean, it was brutal and devastating, and they stole a lot of the gold and jewels. Well, the church in response, the Catholic Church in response, put some kind of heretical excommunication ban on anyone found with those jewels and gold. Because quickly that stuff changes hands once it's gone. You can't sell, jewelry at the butcher store or whatever. You have to change it. Well, this guy, I think his name was Mazzacarati, the superior. He was one of those men who laid siege to these various cathedrals and nunneries. And there were famous battles, and he was dying, and Czerny was trying to save his life. It's freezing cold. The guy's just freezing to death. And he tells Czerny, and he says, "Reach in my pocket and take out this piece of paper. Can you read it?" And he couldn't. Czerny couldn't read. And so Mazzacarati says, "This is what the paper is. It's a receipt for money or for jewels that I stole from the battle of the whatever. It's called like the Battle of the something cathedral because it was fought against a cathedral." And he says, "It's all yours. But know this, if you take it, you're under the excommunication ban of the church. You have to become like me in order to take the jewels. You have to become damned if you believe in that stuff." And so Czerny, it's freezing. He's just listening to it thinking, yeah, okay, whatever. I'll just put it in my pocket. I don't care. Just trying to get out of here. Can you see how deep this novel is, by the way? So Czerny, this is the very beginning, the first couple chapters. They're short chapters. Czerny puts the note in his pocket. He can't read. He doesn't know who to go see. Oh, and by the way, the person to whom he should bring the note was a certain Jew in Italy somewhere. But the name of the Jew was on the paper, and he couldn't read that either. So I thought that was interesting that the only people who could safely hold these jewels that were banned by the church were people who were not Christians, who didn't care.
They were already outside of the church.
They were already outside the church. However, the church provided safety for them. at the same time? Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And so this isn't a critique of Jews so much as it is just an interesting thing that the church created this situation where no Christian could do certain things that yet still needed to be done in certain situations, and therefore you had to bring in you had to allow non-Christians to exist among you. Of necessity, the Christian society needed non-Christians to hold your money. And what was also interesting is that it was the Jews who were actually more honorable in their money dealings than the Christians, because the Jews would hold the money and not do anything with it. Whereas the Christians, at least the ones portrayed in this story, couldn't hold the money. They couldn't hold it because they'd be excommunicated by the church, and they couldn't hold it because as soon as churning gets the money, he has to turn it over. The jewels. As soon as he gets the jewels, he has to turn it over. In fact, the moment he goes to give the guy the note, he gets the Jew brings out the jewels and says, "Please take them. I don't even want to look at it." And Skachurny says, "How much is it worth? Will you buy it from me?" And the guy's like, "No, just leave now. I don't care." And Skachurny starts to justify himself because he's not Mazzacarati. How did you get this note? So he starts to say, "I didn't kill him. I tried." And the guy's like, "I don't care. Just leave. The deal is done. That's all I'm here for. I don't care of the backstory. I just did." It's very scrupulous, extreme. Whereas the Christian is trying to justify himself in one sense for not having murdered this guy. In the next sense, he's trying to sell it quickly and get rid of it. But his conscience is struck because he knows he has this money now that was taken from the ransacking of the church, the brutal destruction and his soul is damned because of it. And it weighs on him. So he's now back in Italy now when all this happens. And these people are extremely Catholic. I know we're Christian, conservative Protestants today, probably a lot of us listening to this podcast. These people were not just Catholic even in the modern sense. I mean, it was extremely Catholic back then, where God was seen in everything. The band that the Catholic Church put was big on his soul and his shoulders, and he can't even walk about town without looking over his shoulder. He takes the money and builds a mill with it. He hires people to build a mill. And they build the mill. He paints, I forgot which patron saint on the side of it, but he also paints Michael the Archangel. So a patron saint who is the patron saint of mills. They had a saint for mills who blesses it. And you have Michael the Archangel defend us from dangers and stuff, because to live on a mill, you're living out on the river itself, away from towns. It's a quiet, peaceful life, but it's also dangerous. It can be dangerous. So he chooses to go do this, and the whole time throughout all the books, the theme of that money is on him. He even seeks repentance in the book from a priest. And he tells the priest everything. He confesses everything. And the priest actually consults his bishop or something, and they end up forgiving him. But they forgave him too easily, and he thought that was too easy. No, I have to do something. And so they put a penance on him to basically go to some church and have a painting commissioned that includes certain prayers and certain saints and things, and also his mill, so that it's known. So there's a painting in a church somewhere, and that's a form of repentance that I've never heard of. It's Catholic, very Catholic, but he has to go and use the money that he's made with the mill to commission this painting, and it's extremely detailed. What happened, I'm kind of getting into some of the story here, okay? But we'll talk about themes in a minute. What happened was, as I mentioned, the river was tumultuous and chaotic. Well, one night there was a storm. Actually, for several days there was a storm, and the river flooded, and he almost lost everything. And that was the same night that his wife was giving birth to their child, and she thought she was dying. And he didn't know how to handle her premonitions of death. And again, this was very Catholic. So she thinks this is certainly from some divine idea coming to her that she's going to die. And she just knows it. And she doesn't think Skachurny loves her anymore because she was very young. I'm guessing 15 years difference between them. And he was early 30s when he got married to her, who was in her teens. So she thinks she's dying. It's the storm. the flood, lightning, trees are splitting. The mill is. He thinks he's losing the mill. His wife's giving birth. He thinks the wife's going to die, and through it, it's divine providence, is what it seems like. Completely, it's not fate. It's not meteorology. Things. It's presented as an apocalypse, and he thinks, God, he looks to the sky in all of this. The lightning flashes and he sees Saint Michael on the side of his mill that's looking like it's going to sink, and the banks are breaking, and one of his servants actually betrayed him in this time, and his wife is crying out, and it's just this whirlwind, and it goes for several chapters, and I have to put it down because it was so much, and I have children. I have to know, like, I can't do this. He thinks it's divine like this is the judgment. This is it. And I won't say how and everything, but the story goes on. He continues. He does have a child, etc., etc. The mill. He has a mill after all of this episode, and because of divine deliverance.
Does he still have a wife?
Yeah, the wife.
Oh, okay.
Survives. The wife survives.
Everybody else made it.
The wife survives.
Okay.
Well, in the middle of all that, he looks up to heaven and swears an oath. If you save me and my wife and my child and the mill, I'll confess everything and I'll do whatever the priests say. I'll do it. I don't care if I have to go to prison. Like, oh God, save me. And so he's delivered, and he goes to the priest, and he confesses everything to having taken this money. And the seriousness of it, I can't communicate it. The book communicates it. The book is well written. It's not a page turner in the modern sense, but it reads so well. You can read it and read it and read it. There's funny stuff. There's bits of wisdom, of old wisdom, sayings in it that clearly came from Italy in the 1800s. Stuff we don't say today, but little ditties, like you got the wolf by the ears, things like that. But it's from Italian things in the 1800s. So you really are getting this old world, different country, different culture, different people, and their proverbs, their idioms, their phrases, all translated into English, nonetheless, and their views of God and providence and religion. Anyway, that's basically where the story goes. They're on the mill. Life is the mill on the Po, and it goes through, like I said, after the Napoleonic era, it goes through the unification. I think it's called Risorgimento or something in Italian. And it goes through that and then into the Great War. The entire time, the family sticks together and finds family, faith, the mill, hard work, the river as their center, as their stable anchor.
Well, hearing all of that makes me feel a lot better about the book, because initially when we had talked about it, you had told me about the money and that it was cursed, and that he takes it and uses it. And that was concerning. I'm like, that's not a small thing. Like, you can't just shrug that off.
Right.
But hearing how he handled it, he had this deep moment of distress.
Yeah.
Like the Martin Luther moment, like, save me and I'll do anything,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're telling me this, that he has this moment and that the rest of his life is spent almost making up for it as best he can,
Yeah. The whole book is so colorful. It's so rich and deep. I could talk about it for hours. Everything, for instance, when he courts his future wife, when he courts her, he plants some kind of hazel bush or something, I forgot what it was, hawthorn bush, in front of her house. And that was the way in the 1800s how someone showed that they were in love with a woman. You put a hazel bush in front of her house, or a hawthorn bush. So the girl wakes up one day and goes outside and sees the hawthorn. She just opens it and just stands still. And she's presented as very frail, not of constitution, but of body, and when she was young, of innocence as well. She thought, me? It can't be. She thought it was a joke. She thought the town people were making fun of her or something. But of course, from Churning's point of view, and from everybody else's point of view, the way the book presents it, she was gorgeous, just absolutely like an angel among them. But she didn't see herself that way. Anyway, I'm getting into that a bit, but the hawthorn bush was funny. I'm thinking, okay, a hawthorn bush. All right, well, today, it's roses today. Or today it's, let me get your Instagram or something extremely cheap and ridiculous, like unoriginal and unromantic.
Actually, this is reminding me of a popular rom-com where a girl is trying to actually ward off a man, and she gets a plant for their relationship, and we have to water it, just like their relationship.
Yeah.
So, keep the plant alive, right?
That's funny. Oops, the plant died.
Yeah, right.
I sprayed it with glyphosate. Too bad. So I want to explain, instead of going through all of the books, which is too much and would take away everybody's enjoyment from personally reading it, just a few themes here to touch on. One is how Riccardo Bacchelli, who is the author, how he portrays the family not just as the social unit, but as sort of a fortress. After the first book, in the second book, there's the Risorgimento, which is the unification of Italy. It went from a bunch of different papal states and sovereign kingdoms and things to a nation. That happened in the 1800s. People, for instance, we all know when Hitler tried to unify Germany into a nation state and gobble up like the Anschluss of Austria and the taking of the Sudetenland and all this, like he marched in on Poland and took the Danzig. This happened in the United States when the North marched into the South and took it.
Isn't that something? Like Lincoln, Hitler, kind of a parallel there.
And then after the Civil War, the same Northern armies, the same exact men, went west and fought the Indians and took over that land too. The same men. You can watch so many movies, for instance, that portray this perfectly well, that men out there fighting in the West, the Indians, were former sharpshooters, cavalrymen in the Union. The same exact men. This also happened in Italy. Unification. You went from a bunch of scattered states, scattered provinces, scattered territories into a nation state. That happened everywhere across the Western world during this time. Italy was late to the game, and it happened in some messy way of itself. But this novel goes through that. It walks you through that from the standpoint of a common man. So if you want to walk through that in Italy, here's what it looks like. Imagine, so the Po, for American audience, this is how you understand the Po. The Po was like living on the Mason-Dixon line back then. If you were in Maine in 1860, you're clearly going to be fighting for the North. If you were in Georgia, you're clearly fighting for the South. If you were in Tennessee or Kentucky,
Missouri,
who do you fight for?
Yeah.
And your family splits up and goes different directions. And you all try to come home for Christmas, and then you can't because you and your brothers are there, and you do, and you hug each other and cry, or you just kind of give us a stoic hello, and you go back to or you come and your brother doesn't come back because he did get killed in the South, and maybe my unit killed him, and it's tearing families apart. The Po is that line where, in one instance, crazy stuff's happening on the North and the South, and it completely flips, and they're living literally on the Po, on it, like in it, on the mill. Well, they have a house off the river also. So the Risorgimento, one day a village would be under the Pope, the next day it would be under Napoleon, the next day it would be under the Austrians, the next day it would be part of the Kingdom of Italy. It would just go back and forth, and you would have different taxes, different duties, different allowances, different money, different, even religion was started to push out. The unification of Italy as it became a nation state pushed out religion. So not only was the Pope no longer controlling these places, religion wasn't important anymore. And we're not going to listen to these people, and you're not going to have authority. You're not going to have anything to do. So for Lazzaro is his first name, Lazzaro Scaccioni. He and his family, his descendants, they turn the mill and their family itself and the Po into their country, so to speak. Now, they don't sit down and plan this out, but this is just how they adapt to it. Everything's changing around us so fast. We can identify with that, especially with the change of technology. They may come out with some new thing tomorrow, or they may import 10 trillion foreigners into my town tomorrow. What do we do? People want to leave a legacy today. Christians talk about being a multi-generational stuff like if you build a legacy here on your 5 acres what's going to really happen tomorrow? The capitalist world, the mass immigration world, the world of the internet, the world of technology, education, jobs, everything's going to pull culture, media, it pulls your family apart. Always screaming at you. Radically show your allegiance to something other than your family. It's pulling on your daughters. It's pulling on your wives, your husbands, your sons, parents, children, grandparents. Everybody break apart and go radically identify with this thing, whatever it is, your new job, some music trend, whatever, political trends. The churning family focuses on protecting themselves and preserving their marriage bonds and their duties to posterity. As the state changes in its unstable forms of government and as it secularizes, the family in the book becomes more and more intentional about its own internal self-government. In that sense, I really think it performs what a lot of conservative Christians want today, which is it becomes this stable unit of society that is its own society unto itself in a world of chaos. I mentioned secular stuff. The unification of Italy was a very secular movement, anti-clerical movement, anti-church. So it wasn't trying to destroy the church like the Enlightenment Revolution period was, but it's going to sideline the church now. You could still exist, you just don't matter. There was also a lot of talk of progress during these changes. And these new government forms that arose, they brought bureaucracy, they brought taxes, they brought conscription, things that tear families apart, reduce your inheritance or steal your sons. It talks a lot about how entire harvests for years would go bad because they stole all the sons. Napoleon stole them, and then the Austrians stole them, and then the Pope stole them, and now the Kingdom of Italy is wanting them. And so every couple years, all the young men are taken away, and people would hide their sons and keep them. If you're living off the mill, hopefully nobody comes around. And because the mill was such a staple of society, it actually gave life. It turned mere wheat into flour that you could eat now. People would often not really look closely at what was happening at the mill. But it also turned into a place that could be a place of thievery and piracy, and nobody would come help either. Anyway, the mill and the family at the mill on the Po acted as a sort of a filter. Like, we're not just going to blindly accept the new way of the world. Every political change that comes, every cultural change that comes, and now today, every technological change, the family, your mill, like this is our mill on the Po. This is us trying to survive and not get involved with every new changing thing that drags us apart, tears us apart, demands our children, feed us your children. And that's basically like the religion of Moloch in the Bible. Give us your children and we'll let you live. So you just go with the way of the world today and you'll be fine, kind of. Back then you wouldn't be fine. One of the key ingredients of making that happen in the book, though, is that there wasn't just a physical threat, it was an identity threat in the book. The family throughout the trilogy becomes sort of the anchor or safe house that prevents people from drifting into secularism also. So it's sort of an outpost of religion for them when the church is being sidelined and it's no longer even a political or cultural authority. And when the culture and political authorities are changing all the time, the family then rises up, or at least not rises in prominence, but it hunkers down. And it begins to hold different rituals and traditions like mealtime prayers, or even crafts like sewing or prayer times. People talk about this. This is how atomized our thinking is today. I keep pointing this out. In modern evangelical Protestant discussions about the family, it's too small. It's too small. For instance, devotions and things. You want to have devotions with your family. You need to have devotions for this, that, and the other. No one ever talks about how this actually turns into a tradition that keeps the family together. It actually turns your life into a life of family habits. And this is how we live. This is who we are. One thing that I've noticed about Catholics, people where we live, and Protestants often make fun of Catholics, but I've often noted how Catholicism for Catholics, even secular wayward Catholics, they're still Catholic. They still go through certain motions and have certain habits.
Fast every Friday.
They still fast every Friday, even though they live like hell or they do whatever they want during the week. The habits and rituals are instilled in them, and they'll never be anything other than Catholic.
Mm-hmm. They put ash on their foreheads on Wednesday.
Yes. Whereas when Protestants go astray, they go wild and adopt a completely different way of life.
Mm-hmm.
Catholics generally don't.
That's true.
When they go astray, they still go to church. Which, look, value that how you will, right? Maybe you want just a completely wayward, you either want hot or cold, I guess.
Yeah. I have noticed what often pulls Catholics back is having children. So a lot of times in their teen or college years, they may not be in church every Sunday, but once they get married, they're going to get married in a Catholic church.
Yeah.
And once they have kids, those kids are going to be baptized in that Catholic church. Yeah. Like, no questions.
Yeah. The family's habits, from mealtime to prayer to crafts like sewing, but also the mill, the craft of milling. This is what kept in the books. This is what kept the children grounded when the outside world kept changing about all the time. It kept changing, screaming for their allegiance all the time. They knew who they were because of the things that they did as a family. For generations, this worked. Another theme is the distinction between fate and providence. So in secular literature, history is a series of accidents or results, cause and effect. History books are so dull because people are trying to write them from this, historians are trying to write them from this impersonal standpoint of cause and effect, of necessary historical forces just unfolding like a boulder rolling downhill, and you're just logically watching it happen. That's the sort of fate, naturalistic, unfolding, logical, mechanical forces that crush the individual. But in this book, Bakeli writes a very religious, sacramental, even spiritual view of history. So for instance, in the first book of The Mill on the Po, which is called God Be With You, I think, the river doesn't just flood. Like I said earlier, it doesn't flood because of rain merely. It really feels like either God's judgment or God's mercy. I mean, you get the sense of, during this, that it's cataclysmic, it's apocalyptic, it's divine, and this is either judgment or mercy. We're not sure which. Throughout the entire reading of this, we're not sure what's going to happen. And even after you think, oh, okay, so it was mercy, right? Like, maybe, but God is in it. The whole thing is divine, and even the evil in it is of a spiritual nature. It's not just men choosing evil because of their underprivileged conditions or things like that, because of social factors. It's evil because these people are sent from God to do it, or the devil, or something. It doesn't present the flood as meaningless, as just tragedy that one has to stoically bear up and suffer. Sort of after the fall of Rome, this is interesting, Rome became more secular. And instead of seeing things as divine, it saw them as just chaotic and fatalistic. And that's when Stoicism and Epicureanism arose. Marcus Aurelius was writing in AD, not BC. The whole time period of the Romans basically having this stoic bear up life's sufferings and never show a change when things go bad. That's not how the early period of Rome or the Greeks, like the mythology period, that's not how it shows takings of the vicissitudes of life. When things change and they're great, you sacrifice to the gods and praise them and you rejoice and celebrate. And when things are terrible, you cry out to them and cry and beat your breast and tear out your hair, sit in sackcloth and ashes. And it's not until the fall of Rome, when basically the faith of Rome was lost, and they stopped believing even in their own gods. This is what Augustine said in his City of God. When Rome fell, the Romans blamed Christians. And they said, Rome's falling because the gods are punishing us for having abandoned them and joined the Christian faith. And Augustine wrote back in the City of God, basically a response to that, and said, no, Rome's falling because you have abandoned your own gods. You're not even righteous anymore according to your own standards, some of which were natural and just. I mean, the Romans did get some things right. So they became hopeless. That's what a lot of history is today. In the atheistic, secular, Enlightenment, humanist world that we live in, since the time of the 1800s, really, a lot of history has been written such that there's no God, no gods, not even the pagan gods existing. There's nothing. And the way that Bacchelli writes is one where the changes of life are seen through the lens of the divine, the realm of God and angels, by the way, because again, it's Catholic. So you paint Michael the Archangel on the side of your mill because he's real and he will protect you. And sure enough, he did. There was a big challenge, though, to the Catholicism during this time. For over 1,000 years, the Pope wasn't just a spiritual leader. He ruled the papal states. He was a political ruler also. It's hard for us to get our minds around. People think, no, theocracy. If people today want the nation to be Christian or something, that's never going to work. Actually, it did work. It worked in Europe for over 1,000 years. It worked. However, as Italy moved to unification, specifically Italy, like when America moved to unification, it wasn't this big religious upheaval, although you can point out there were religious things going on, but not like in Italy. Italy was a country or a region where there was a religious leader. The blunt equivalent today would be like having some kind of Joseph Smith or John Smith, whatever his name was, Joseph Smith for the Mormons, or some kind of Muslim leader for the Muslims ruling over them. And then they depose him and form up into nation states. I mean, just imagine that. But then they still remain Mormon or Muslim and something. They get rid of Joseph Smith. Or they just let him continue existing but no longer listen to him. So basically you leave your Mormonism, essentially. You leave your Muslim belief. In what sense are you a Muslim at all if you're not listening to the prophet? So you leave the Pope and let him sit there in his Vatican with his big walls right there and never come out. But we're going to go on living as Catholics. And this is supposed to be secularism. This is what religion turns into. You can be ever so religious so long as it doesn't matter, so long as it doesn't come outside of your house or even outside of your heart, actually. During the unification in the mid-1800s, the revolutionaries wanted to take the land that the Pope owned and controlled. So the conflict really became, in order to be a patriot for your country, you had to be anti-clerical against your religion. You can't be for the Pope and for Italy. That's the claim. And again, you can see the allegiances are shouting at you continually. This is what happens when you live in a politically polarized environment or a revolutionary environment. You're continually being screamed at from not just two sides, like 4 or 5 sides, and they change, screamed at to show utter, absolute, unflinching loyalty to one of them. And what you have to be able to do is look at all of them and give them the middle finger. Except the church. Don't do that to the church. Okay? Well, no, but what happens really, though, what happens in people's lives is they look at all of them and think, which one's going to be the winner? That's what people do. Churning's family doesn't do that. People will do that, though. They look at which side they think is going to be the winner. Which side? Is it going to be Antifa or BLM? The left or the right? The right-wing faction, the Christians, or the secular people? The whites or the immigrants? Or the North or the South? Which side are we going to throw our hat in on? And that's the side they don't say it like that. But fear is something you don't have to say. You feel it, and it moves you. Sometimes people are moved by greed, like Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. He threw his hat in on one side because he saw what was happening. He wasn't ideologically driven. I think people who are ideologically driven are usually blind to actual reality. But that doesn't mean if you're not full of ideas, you're not also driven by emotions and passions. The Churning family looked at things and thought, we're going to do what's best for our family and what we think is right before God. That's what we're going to do. That doesn't mean the Pope has to rule over us as a political leader, but that's what we're going to do as a family. This is very much a trad conservative book in that sense of the family is the unit. And it's not the unit of the state, by the way. A lot of Christians today who paint themselves as some sort of traditionalist, they'll say like, the family is the social unit of the nation. I mean, was Abraham's family the social unit of the state-nation thing? No. It was its own society unto itself. And we're going to have our own rights and our own traditions, our own, not necessarily laws in the sense of a civil government, but our own laws in the sense of what we're going to do is right or wrong no matter what the state says. So there's a dilemma here. The Millers, all of the Millers on the Po, they saw the shifting powers. And because they were often at that boundary of things shifting, at the geographical boundary, Lazzaro and his son Giuseppe, who's our loyalty to? Is it to the King of Italy? Is it to the Vicar of Christ? Is it to family? They wrestle with that in the book. Throughout years, by the way, stuff flips. It goes back. It's not like this is a settled one-time thing. Like, oh, I'm glad we moved beyond COVID and that's over. Or I'm glad the war in Iraq is finished. No more fighting wars for Israel. Whew, no more fighting wars for oil in the Middle East. No, actually, we're going back to Iran now. And your children are going to get sucked into it. The wars you fought are coming back. The taxes you paid are being paid again, being taken again. You have to have as a family these strong bonds that outlast the vicissitudes of politics. People have to survive. We're going to survive and thrive and worship and serve God. A really important theme here that Christians will all sort of sympathize with is that there was this loss of church temporal and cultural authority. So the church was literally the bedrock of social order. And now the state takes over the schools, the charities, the hospitals, the laws, takes over the roads and the bridges and everything. Literally, the state just takes over. It's no longer everything, every part of life is no longer upheld by nodding your head to God and his representatives, the priests and things. It now belongs to the state to rule all of life. There was a reaction in the 1900s to this among Christians. So the state was totalitarian. That word totalitarian, well, it means all of the state in every part of life. And then you get these reactions among people saying things like, there's not one maverick molecule in all of the universe. You've heard that probably from R.C. Sproul. There's not one square inch over which Jesus doesn't say mine. That was Abraham Kuyper. A lot of these reactionaries basically flipped it and said, no, the state gets this like libertarian little slice. And the family, oh yeah, it's a really strong, but the church is this like important. They were reacting and trying to make the church this all of life, all of everything. It's your new family. It's your new society. If you go back to this time in Italy, you can see the church was very important, but even back then it wasn't like your new family or something. The Catholic way in Italy, the church didn't have basketball gyms and baseball fields. You went there for forgiveness. You went there for worship and bread and wine, and then you went home. Yeah, a lot of times Protestants will say that there's no fellowship in some kind of higher liturgical church. But we're living on the other side of that, where there have been these upheavals in life and reactions to those upheavals and changes. And now the churches are expected to take on a totalitarian of their own. We're going to be all of your life and everything, and nothing's going to happen outside of us. We are your new fellowship. We are your new family. We're your new vacations. We're your new school. We're your new hospital, charity.
We're who you call for help.
Yes. Yep. Everything. Exactly. What Churning and his family do is their loyalty is to Christ and also to the church, but their family takes on the practical role of being the social unit for them. And not just for them. That's kind of how it's presented for all of the working people, all of the common people. This is how we survive. We survive through family. I think there's something to that. Look at how these Mexicans come into America. They come in very poor, and we who are not as poor as they all talk about how hard it is to live in America today. How are they living? How are they people? Like if in America, the housing market here is so terrible, if the job market is so terrible, how are these people able to come in and survive? Family. And not just the nuclear family, extended family. Family. You're able to survive tragedy, real tragedy, by the way. Not just like a dip in the stocks and 401ks and stuff. Not just hiring policies that kind of target you and your identity group or something, but real hardship in life. How are you able to survive it? Aunts and uncles, cousins, friends that all band together. Unquestioning loyalty in your family. That's how. And the Italians knew it because they suffered and struggled and they went through things.
For that to work, you really have to have a family that understands, like each member of the family has to understand its role. And I think that probably was so for the Scaturnis. There probably wasn't a battle, for instance, for the wife trying to assert her will, or for, the children and things. Like there was probably clear roles there. Like the Scaturni, he was the head, he was leading, he was in charge. The wife supported and helped, and I think you need that also to have it to be for the family to be a successful unit, like you're talking.
Yeah, that was definitely there in the story. Absolutely. Scaturni had built that life for them, so he was their patriarch, their progenitor.
And wasn't his wife poor?
They were not well off. Yeah, her dad was a shopkeeper, I think, and he did not manage things well. And his wife always let him know it. And whenever he actually married off his daughter to Scaturni, he tried to hit Scaturni up for money here and there, like, just loan me a few crowns, there's a good fellow, and Scaturni would say, no, I'll only loan you 3, not 7 crowns or something, whatever the money unit was back then. And then the dad would complain, like, no one ever takes into consideration her dad, the father-in-law would complain, my sufferings, and the wife would say, sufferings? You've been sitting on the couch all day, you've done nothing. And so he would try to bum his son-in-law for money, and then the son-in-laws, would say, nah, I'll give you a little bit, and you're not going to pay it back. So it's funny, the Scaturni family practiced a sort of Benedict option, but 180 years ago. They focused on their local community, their work, their faith, because they couldn't control the Risorgimento, the unification of Italy, and the jostling back of powers among them that was happening in Rome. They couldn't do it. And I find it interesting today that the Anglo mind in America, so white people in America are largely dominated by Anglo culture, ethnicity, forms of thought, that's very individualistic, stiff upper lip, kind of stoic, everybody's split apart, atomized, find your own way, bootstraps. That way of thinking isn't actually very successful when you have extreme opposition in life and vicissitudes. It works when you have a lot of prosperity or freedom, free opportunity. There's just tons of space and you can all scatter apart from each other. But when you don't have that, which is most people throughout all of history, you have to band together and work together. You absolutely have to. I think that, for instance, Rod Dreher's book, The Benedict Option, I mentioned Benedict Option here, he went through a lot of research to figure that out, to learn how is it that people survived communism. And he discovered they worked together. Wow! I mean, that's basically what the book says. Work together. Form some underground networks that don't fly above the radar. You fly below it, unseen, and thinking, yeah, that's what people have always done throughout all of human history. That's what tens of millions of immigrants are doing here today. I don't agree with some of the stuff happening. For instance, the Somalis that a few months ago got caught funneling money in Minnesota. People think, how is it that that was able to happen? How is it that these Somalis who are, they're refugees, supposedly uneducated. I mean, compared to us, okay, their resources are low, their education is low. They don't even understand our political, but they can come here and just pile up a bunch of money, steal a bunch of money from us. They all work together. That's how they did it. None of them ratted on each other. There's no spies and doxers among them. There's no betrayers. Everybody's loyal to each other. That's how you look. I'm not saying that that's a good thing that they did, but they're stronger together than they are atomized.
Sometimes we've imitated the wrong Benedict.
Yeah, really. That's a good, Benedict Arnold. Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, which Benedict option?
Yeah. Yeah. Which Benedict option there, Rod? Wow. Yeah. Isn't that what it is, though? Instead of fleeing your family to go live in another country, as somebody has done, you stick with your family and build a network, impenetrable, multi-generational, and it lasts regimes. It lasts through regimes. It lasts through acts of God that are like tornado and apocalyptic and floods, and it lasts. I think that just like the Po, the mill is also a metaphor. It's literally anchored. It's a floating houseboat is what it is. It's not like an English mill that's on the flat ground and it's got a water wheel sticking out.
Mm-hmm.
It's floating in the water and it's anchored. It's anchored. It moves up and down a little bit and it gives and it moves. I mean, I can make a nice analogy here.
Yeah, it is nice.
It is.
Go ahead.
It moves. It moves up and down and it floats and it changes. It flexes a little bit, but it's always where it is. That's the mill on the Po. That's life.
I think that's family too. Your family grows for a while, then eventually it gets smaller. And,
Yeah.
It changes like that too, but
Right.
You're anchored together as a family.
If you're someone who's wanting to know how to build a family that stays together beyond the mere nuclear family when your kids are like 3 years old and you all just have this nice little warm glow sunshine garden feel, you want actually to be together for generations. You want to build a legacy and a heritage. You want to survive the chaos of the modern world. This is a book to read. This is a book to read. And it was set outside of our own world, so it gives you all kinds of perspective that you would never imagine. And it helps you see your own. I think this book is a really, really important read for adults, not for young people, but for adults to work through a lot of the issues that we are living through ourselves. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this content, please consider supporting the show by subscribing at arslibri.substack.com. Your support enables me to produce this content. Subscribers also get bonus episodes, detailed book lists, and more.
Haneme kore